excited to have the opportunity to present the results of the work package 1 and 2, that were those with, I would say, epidemiological packages. But in a way, the idea was to provide the stuff to all the other groups to work with. And I'm very glad to have this opportunity. And I'm very glad to see that there are so many attendees to the meeting. That's really exciting. And generally, you say, thank you very much at the end of the presentation, but I would like to anticipate a moment, this part, and to say thank you very much to all the partners of the COST project, but especially to all laboratories that contributed data. That was so precious, because I understand so difficult it was. Nowadays, with privacy, with organization, that's very difficult to deal with individual data, and they did it. So thank you very much. That was really important. And now let's move into the introduction of how I'm going to present our data using a very old picture. If you look at this picture, many people knows well, that is from National Research Council in the US. 35 years ago, they started with this classification of biomarkers in exposure, effect, early effect, susceptibility. That was very successful, because in a way it continues still nowadays to be used, even if has several weaknesses. However, the point is that even in this period, in this long period, there is still a number of major problems with this refiguration, this imaging of the chain of events described by biomarkers. And the first part is dealing with the definition of the biomarkers. There is still this variability, this reliability of markers that is still still missing. In a way, we have still doubts, a number of doubts about the biomarkers that we have not completely addressed. So that was one of the topics that with the hCOMET we started to consider, especially for hCOMET, which is, as anticipated, Andrew, is very variable. Variability is generally a problem. The other major problem is that the idea is that you identify early events so you can predict long-term events, like outcomes, which is cancer, maybe symptoms, maybe cancer, maybe disability, whatever. So in a way, this is what we have done. I mean, the idea was to, with our project, to increase the reliability of biomarker, of COMET-SA. And when I say reliability, I decided, I had to decide which term to use, because validity is another good term. But in a way, reliability, it means that how much can I trust this biomarker? So this is one of our effort. And the other was our biomarkers, how much our biomarkers predict long-term event. So that in a way, these were the two main issues that were addressed, and there were the two main questions. Can we make COMET-SA a more reliable marker and a more predictive marker? Or better, can we assess the reliability and the predictivity of this biomarker? The idea of using pooled analysis to evaluate the extent of variability is something which is popular in molecular epidemiology. For instance, let me show this slide, which is from an old paper of mine, in which I described from micronuclei the variability from different laboratories. You see that there are laboratories scoring maybe 2 per thousand, 1 per thousand micronuclei, and other showing reporting 15,000 which is 15 micronuclei each 1,000 cells, which means an order of magnitude, 10 times more. So there's a huge variability. And so in that study, in that project, we try to estimate the contribution of different features of the analysis to the final variability. And the end was quite clear that protocol variability was the responsible for a large part of general variability. The same for scoring criteria. And then there was also the exposure, host factor, which is in a way are the kind of variability that you are expecting. I mean, exposed people should be should have higher levels than unexposed. So the total proportion that was I mean, all these factors explain in our model 75%, a large part of this proportion, so of this variability. So the idea was that if you make studies like this, you can try to understand much better the variability, the sources of variability, and to control them. So this is what has been already shown, how international was the contribution of the data contributed to the hCOMET database. And the results of this part, I mean, the description of the database has been published, or at least is nearly published, because it's not on the PubMed, but the paper can be found on the website of Mutation Research Reviews. You can see how many contributors, how many authors are part of this study, in which we describe baseline frequency of DNA damage and the main confounders in the COMET assay. And for instance, one of the problems we had is that we have at least 4 different endpoints, 4 different predictors for the COMET assay, which is from the tail intensity, tail moment, tail length, visual scoring. And in a way, however, we've provided results for all the endpoints, but we concentrated the results for tail intensity, which is not only the endpoints, which is more robust in terms of mechanistic evidence, but is also the most popular. And we were able to put together 8,000 subjects score for with the COMET assay for tail intensity. So we try to provide an interval of results that are expected to be reasonable when you perform a COMET assay. And for instance, if you perform you measure tail intensity with a regular COMET assay, you can expect to see values in terms of tail intensity which are in between I don't know, 3 more or less if you have an exposed population, and you can expect maybe from 1 to 6. A more precise definition is 1.3 to 5.4 for the median. So in a way, these results suffered for the large variability, inter-laboratory variability. So we did this mixed random effect log linear modeling, which included host factors and some general issues like exposure, cell type, sample processing, and in a way, these results try to take into consideration these sources of variation. So to provide results that if you make an analysis on a control population and you get results which are out of this interval, you should ask, why my results are out of the interval, which is the most popular, most common in all the other world laboratories. I may have a problem, or may have a different population or whatever. Actually, measuring the effect of age was not so simple because of the variability. However, that was quite interesting to find an increasing significant trend for tail intensity, which was not a perfect trend like telomeres shortening, but was quite clear. I mean, a subject in between 0 to 18 years have a, for instance, let's talk about medium, is a medium of 2, 2.1, you go to 5.3, 4.0, and the people over 61 have a mean tail intensity over 6, which is about 3 times the youngest group. Not so clear the difference for males and females, in which probably we could not help take into consideration completely confounding. So probably the effect of residual confounding created this differences are not so evident. Sometimes, for instance, in this case, for tail intensity, we have a higher level in males, at least talking about the mean value, but it's not so clear. So I wouldn't be so sure that sex is a major source of confounding. Whereas good news is that when you study exposure to DNA damaging agents, the results are, I mean, COMET assay is a good biomarker for measuring exposure. And you see that this is a forest plot similar to the one done for meta-analysis. And you see that the large majority of studies investigating DNA population exposed to DNA damaging agent found a significantly increased frequency of damage. And in a way, this was the results. These are the results from the first part. But a lot of interest was also on the second part, so to understanding if COMET assay, with measuring COMET assay in subjects, we can predict the long-term risk of to die of chronic diseases, to get a cancer, or to get any other adverse events. So obviously, what happened for chromosomal aberration for micronuclei is that these biomarkers are somehow considered risk biomarker. And so this has implications for mechanistic understanding of carcinogenesis, or the pathway or the pathogenesis of major non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular, respiratory, metabolic diseases. And there is this a positive association between DNA damage and the long-term risk expressed like mortality, for instance, or cancer incidence, may have important implication for disease prevention, for public health policies, occupational environmental health policies, but also for legal issues. I mean, right in these days, I've been put in, I mean, there was a legal firm that asked me to provide support for a group. I cannot enter into the detail, for a population that were exposed to environmental carcinogens, to see if we can use micronuclei to predict cancer. And we can do the same with COMET assay if we can get robust results. The results, the first, the design to associate COMET assay to long-term events like mortality and cancer is more or less the same that has been used in the end of the 1990s for chromosomal aberrations. This was a study done in Italy and Scandinavian Scandinavian countries, in which we found a very strong association between survival in people with low level of chromosomal aberrations and medium and high level of chromosomal aberration. There was a highly significant difference. I mean, people with low level has a much better probability to survive. That was quite parallel, similar in between the Italian cohort based on mortality for cancer and the Nordic cohort based on cancer incidence. I generally use to show a picture just to remember Lars Hagmar was the epidemiologist that designed most of these studies, and it was very brilliant. It was a very good friend of mine, so that was sad not to have him here to be involved. He would have been for sure involved in the hCOMET SA initiative. A little later in 2007, 2008, we were able to create a very large cohort of 22,000 subjects, adding a Central Eastern European, a group of Central Eastern European countries to the Italian Scandinavian countries, and we got results. And that was quite clear that people in the high tertile of chromosomal aberration and the medium tertile has a significantly increased risk of dying or getting a cancer than people in the lowest tertile. Results that were replicated with micronuclei. The cohort was a little smaller, but you see, however, was very international. And we got data on mortality and incidence, and we were able to get similar results to the one for chromosomal aberration. You see that even though there was some mix-up with high and medium, it was quite clear that subjects with the lowest level, the lower tertile or micronuclei has a much better probability to survive from cancer. And you see results are highly significant. The idea was that the main idea supporting these results were that you have an exposure inducing the biological event. In that case, it was probably symmetrical translocation in the target organ. You cannot measure this relevant event there, but you can measure surrogate endpoints in surrogate tissue, perhaps in lymphocytes. That was what happened for chromosomal aberrations and micronucleated cells. You see that this link was quite clear. Exposure increases both this event. We had to demonstrate that higher level of this biomarker are associated, can predict the risk of cancer. And obviously, this biomarker are associated with the biological event. So we try to replicate the same approach with DNA damage in surrogate tissues measured with the hCOMET SA. A little more complicated is the biological event, which is, DNA damage is a quite is implicated, is a pleiotropic biomarker, I would say, is implicated with several events. So the biological events may deal with genomic instability, gene amplification, the inactivation of tumor suppressor genes, or even epigenetic mechanism. However, what we wanted to demonstrate is that this part is true. If you have a higher level of DNA damage, you may have also higher risk of cancer and non-communicable diseases. The group managing the cohort and the project, I like the picture, so is also involved, as also shown here. These are the cohort was much smaller than the other, because of, I told you, now to work as a molecular epidemiologist is a problem, is a nightmare, because if you have to deal with genetics, individual issues, and privacy. So you have to get several permission, individual and institutional permission. So it was not easy, and we were able to create a small cohort, 22,000 person years. The follow-up was good, 10 years, almost 11 years. The numbers are not fully satisfactory, but enough to show some results. And these are the results. Actually, the approach design was exactly the same as in the other for micronuclei for chromosomal aberrations. You standardize interlaboratory variation using tertiles. Subjects were considered in each laboratory as high, medium, low tertile, so we can collapse all of them and perform the analysis. The analysis you see here adjusted for sex, age, smoking habit, show that the subject in the medium tertile has a little higher increase of mortality, and whereas people in the highest tertile has a 38% significantly increased mortality, which is more or less in the same range of effect for the other micronuclei, which is quite interesting. It's not so strong, but is significant, and make that, I mean, with this design, we know that we are seriously underestimating the association. But once, even with underestimating the association, we find a significant association, we say that probably the association is much stronger. Survival analysis is pretty good. That was highly significant. The long-range test for Kaplan-Meier curves was significant. You see that even in this case, subjects in the first tertile had a much better probability to survive. Due to small number, we were able, we needed to collapse mortality. So when I say overall mortality, we excluded incident. I mean, those mortality which are not associated with a disease. And so overall mortality is mostly due to cardiovascular and cancer mortality. And so this is the idea that you can predict overall mortality. We had a similar results for cancer. I have not shown them because they are borderline significant, and they go in the right direction, but they are not significant enough to be robust enough we trust them because they are in the right direction. We show the same results with other biomarkers of DNA damage, but still the small number ask for further studies. But these are, and this data are under evaluation in a good journal. I mean, we were, unfortunately, these data were rejected by big journals, but still we are looking for a good publication. So this is what we have done. Now, as Andrew said, anticipated, I mean, that were the major questions that were at the start of the hCOMET project. We got some results, at least from these work packages. Other work packages will provide other results. However, it was quite clear that cohort as a space for optimizing protocols. We identified a range of most credible values, which is a strong support for the laboratories, especially for new laboratories, new in the field. And we got some important result about the role of host factor, especially age. And we confirmed even though I don't want to be too enthusiastic about this data linking the DNA damage to overall mortality, especially mortality for non-communicable disease. But results are significant. There is a lot of variability. That means we are underestimating, and the mechanisms are quite clearly in that direction. So we can believe that this data are the very first brick to create the wall of evidence linking and DNA damage to risk of mortality from an epidemiological point of view. And so what next? So the project is finished, but we have these results. So we want to say what to do next. We have these results that are linking, emphasizing the role of COMET assay and DNA damage measured by the COMET assay as a biomarker that can be used to estimate the risk, but also to be involved in the pathogenesis of diseases. So we can use this to predict and to use it for diagnosis. Can we use it for prognosis? And so how to establish this association, how to get evidence in this direction? Because of course, before using in clinical practice, evidence must be very strong. For instance, we started this discussion with micronuclei, and in micronuclei there is a number of examples in which micronuclei is used. Biodosimetry, in occupational monitoring, and so on. There is a number of examples in which there is a lot of evidence, but not enough to be used in clinical. Inadequate nutrition, pregnancy complication, mortality risk for cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and many other in which there is a lot of evidence, but we need much more results. So what could be the roadmap to move from preclinical studies, from the evidence we have so far, and to design studies to validate this biomarker in a strong way so that can be used for clinical practice. And this is a paper that Michael Fennec and I have written and is still submitted after 5 months to mutation research reviews, and I hope that that can be accessible to everybody, because I believe is a first effort to start a roadmap, actually, to say what should we do before these biomarkers can be used in clinical practice. And this is what we have nowadays. In a way, we know mechanisms, and perhaps in many applications, COMET assay is at this level. I would say most of studies shown that people with a disease has a different level of DNA damage than people without the disease. That as Andrew said before, this could be the result of reverse causation. So it's the disease to increase the DNA damage and not the DNA damage to cause the disease. We don't know, but there is a number of mechanisms that support the idea, which is the DNA damage, that is an important step in the pathogenesis to the disease. And another issue is that people with exposed to genotoxic or to carcinogenic agents increases the level of DNA damage measured with the COMET assay. So I would say that somehow we are here at step 1, and we need to move to step 2, 3, and further. The step 3, the idea is that to start the idea for instance, improving protocols, improving the reliability of the biomarkers, and especially reducing inter and intra variability of the assay. So we can have, when we use cholesterol, or we know that 200 milliliter of cholesterol is the same in Italy and in Scotland. And so if Andrew and I go to our GP, the result is the same. For hCOMET assay is something to come, but we need really this part. And then when we have a reliable biomarker, we can move really to step 3, which is the prospective studies, in which you remove most of confounding, and randomized controlled trials, which is the next step. Controlled trials are really the strongest epidemiological design that allow us to get results which are really robust. So we can say something more about DNA damage, which is stronger and stronger. And the little step further is the use of hCOMET assay in pragmatic trials, which is real life. So when there is enough evidence from prospective studies, cohort studies, and randomized controlled trials, so we can see these results in the general population. This is what really we need, because once the predictivity of DNA damage is credible to the medical field, to the medical professionals. So in this case, they will start to use it. And then see, in a way, so when will be used it, so we can demonstrate how practical, how reliable, especially how clinically useful is this approach. So in a way, this is a roadmap. So we are some way here. So there is, but what is really, we believe is important is to have a direction. And this is I believe is the right direction for validating this biomarker for human studies. And then there is a huge amount of options, a huge amount of applications for DNA damage biomarkers. Some are already in use, I mean, for like prevention, identify people in early stages of diseases, or people which is susceptible because are DNA damage defective. So maybe that may help with the prognosis, but there is so much to see, so much to come. So for mechanism sensor to identify, I mean, could be a therapeutic target. Genetic profiling in personalized medicine. I mean, DNA damage is more and more used in genetic profiling, because it's a kind of, the problem of profiling is that when you look into a single gene, is too small the effect. I mean, and there is so many pathways that repair the effect of that damage. When we are talking about DNA damage in general, and DNA damage, single strand breaks, or oxidative damage is something which is very general, and the impact, the effect, the influence of these events on long-term effect can be really, really important. And also, if you look at other endpoints, maybe in rehabilitation, quality of life, cognitive functions, or even more and more interesting can be an alternative endpoints in randomized clinical controlled trials. You know that there is a big problem with randomized controlled trials that, for instance, think about oncology. You develop a new drug. If there's a drug on overall survival, designed to test overall survival, you need to wait years before you can use it. you validate the new drug, but in near maybe a new drug come out. So it's really a problem. And to have biomarkers that can anticipate the final outcome, it's really all the pharmaceutical industry is looking for that. So there is a more and more potential, more and more possible application. And I believe that the hCOMET has for sure contributed to this hunt, to this, and I believe that we are just at the beginning. And so thank you all for, thank you to all the groups participating into the project, 2 laboratories contributing data, and 2 new laboratories that will do in our next initiative. That's it. Thank you very much.
There is one question in the Q&A.
Marco, this is a very difficult question. Very, very difficult, because we received exactly, when I did the study on chromosomal aberrations, we received the same questions from a couple of ethics committee. If you validate the biomarker as a risk biomarker, what to do in the people which are in the highest tertile? So people which is considered to be at higher risk. Their answer was, I don't know, because actually, if these people are exposed to some DNA damaging or carcinogen agents, the most reasonable answer is to say, okay, guy, you have a higher risk than the other people. So I cannot do anything for you, but inform you to say, perhaps you better stop smoking. More complicated if he is exposed to carcinogens in occupational environment. In this case, I believe nothing can be done at individual level, but something can be done at a group level. So occupational, I mean, the offices responsible for occupational safety must be informed for that. And this is what if you find out a group with higher level, you should say, okay, we have to inform people, because these people may be at higher risk to die earlier than expected because of higher level of DNA damage. And on the individual level, nowadays, there is not a validated practice okay, you can improve the medical surveillance, but it's not validated to reduce cancer incidence and to extend survival. There is no data. So, I mean, difficult question and answer, uncertain answer. Helda, this is an interesting suggestion. We actually tried to do this multi-dimensional descriptive analysis in different ways, including component analysis. The point, it didn't work very well, because the point is that there was a strong interlaboratory correlation. So generally, when I mean, for everybody, the idea is that when you perform a component analysis, you plot in a way in the same space different sources of variability, and you try to see if they vary together. That's very informative. The point is that the same laboratory use the same type of cells, use the same steps of the protocol. So the component analysis didn't work well. So we had to make stratification to make other analysis. What is the criteria for low, median, high? Is there a design threshold for each of them? Amina, okay, here is also another difficult question. This is a very rude approach. And in each laboratory, we divided the whole data in 3. using 33rd and 66th percentiles. So lowest, medium, and highest tertile. Then we pulled all together. You may say that people with a very high level of exposure may be different from others. So we try also to make more sophisticated approaches. And we did multi-level analysis, for instance, which is the most effective approach. And the results were absolutely the same, and even not so good as using tertiles. So we use tertiles because it is easier to people to understand, and were the same used for micronuclei and chromosomal aberrations. So we got results which are comparable. And Wilton, have you ever worked with occupational low-dose ionizing radiation? We publish a few studies, but that was most common for chromosomal aberrations. So I'm sorry, I was mixing up chromosomal. I did it for chromosomal aberrations, and we published several paper trying to make sense of the link between how can exposure can be predicted by the level of chromosomal aberration, especially chromosome type. I have no experience with the COMET assay, despite there is a lot of evidence, a lot of literature. Okay, what I can say is that for sure I have this great, as you have understood, I have this great interest into the idea of moving from a group level to individual level, which is, I believe, is really a big challenge, because if you can move our biomarkers, I would say early events biomarkers, and I believe that DNA damage is really a critical one, because it's the very beginning, it's very important. If you can move the evidence available from group level to individual level, and you can talk about individual exposure level or individual prevention, or even moving to clinics, it will attract much more interest, and we can impact a lot public health and medicine as well, and prevention as well. So I believe if you are interested in this direction, and you have an idea, contact me. I'll be happy. Or contact the hCOMET website, because I'm sure that this commitment is shared by most of our group. Although it has been strongly recommended in the last years, TEL intensity as a parameter, visual analysis never ceased to be analyzed. There is even an article by Dr. Collins showing the strong correlation between both. This article has always been very important for us. Even with electrophoresis time variation, the image may even show a larger tail, but the shape of the image does not change. I believe that this is why we do not observe a correlation with age as clear as with micronuclei. When we talk about human, there is several factors that interfere the individual current state. Yes, I believe also that is the reason for which there is data failed to show a clear curve in between DNA damage, tail intensity, I mean, or visual scoring as well, and age. However, just 4 seconds point to say that as regard visual scoring, this is very practical and the results are efficient. But in a way, what was the problem with us is that at the end of the story, in the problem of heterogeneity, of methodological heterogeneity, is worst for visual scoring than for other endpoints that are measured with image analyzer, because some group use 3 levels, some other 5 levels, some other 4, and in a way this difference made it very difficult for us to provide reference levels. So I still believe very strongly in visual scoring, but I believe that probably some specific efforts should be done in this direction. That may be low tech, but provide a strong support for many laboratories in the world using this. Because you can get the same results with your eyes as a most sophisticated image analyzer machine. So that's exciting, but we need to improve the protocol for that.